Ames Mayor, City Council and Assistant City Manager sit at a curved dais.
Well, good evening. Good evening. We will go ahead. Is this working?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Just project.
Well, good evening. Call the regular meeting of the Ames City Council for April 28th to order. We're going to start out with a couple of proclamations and then some presentation of Historic Preservation Awards. So we'll start out with the proclamation for Arbor Day.
Oh. It was on. Yes. The mic. It's on.
Can you hear now?
You got to talk.
Can you hear in the back?
Talk way into it.
Can you hear now?
Yes.
Oh my God.
See?
Okay, I'm sorry. I'll start over. I call the regular meeting for the Ames City Council for April 28th to order. We're going to start out with a couple of proclamations and then go on some presentation for Historic Preservation Award. So we'll start with the Arbor Day.
Mayor walks to podium to read proclamations.
Arbor Day. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed at the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees, and whereas this holiday called Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can reduce the wind erosion of our topsoil, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce oxygen, and provide a habitat for wildlife, and whereas trees are renewable resources that increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of the business area, and beautify our community. And whereas this year marks the 42nd consecutive year that the City of Ames has been recognized as Tree City, USA. Therefore, I, John A. Haleb, Mayor of the City of Ames, Iowa, do hereby proclaim Friday, April 24th, 2026 as Arbor Day in Ames. I encourage residents to plant a tree, mulch existing trees, and protect our trees and woodlands by becoming good stewards of the land. This year's Arbor Day recognition was a volunteer tree planting last Saturday, April 25th, that began at 9 a.m. Volunteers helped plant 70 trees in the Welbeck Drive and Crestmore Avenue neighborhood. Also, Ames residents can receive a rebate for planting a native tree on their property or in the adjacent right-of-way. Information can be found on the City of Ames website in the Smart Watersheds and Rebates area. It's my pleasure to introduce Gabby Edwards, our forester. If you make a few comments. Gabby?
Good evening, everyone. So as Mayor Hala said, our Arbor Day event was actually last Saturday. So if you participated in that, thank you very much. We had about 45 volunteers come out and plant 70 trees in a neighborhood in the north part of town, which we're very grateful for. It was a great day to plant trees, and I know that neighborhood will really benefit from those trees in the future as well. Since our Arbor Day planting was last weekend, I wanted to make you all aware of another event that we have coming up on Saturday, May 16th, another community volunteer tree planting event. This one is along Kentucky, Illinois, Indiana, and Idaho Avenue, north of Ontario Street. We'll be planting 35 trees. So if you'd like to plant a tree in Ames and help us build our Tree City USA status every year, please come out and help us plant those trees on Saturday, May 16th. And with me tonight, I have Matt Rochford. He is a maintenance worker in our Parks and Recreation Department, and he assists our forestry team with me year-round doing tree work. As well, we have a staff of about 7 or 8 other maintenance workers in our department that assist with trees throughout the winter time that are doing the bulk of our work in those winter months. So we really appreciate being a Tree City USA and the support that the City of Ames has towards the benefit of trees in our community. Thank you.
Mayor and City Parks and Recreation staff pose for a picture.
And next is Historic Preservation Month. And we have Melissa Goodwin, Devin Lewis, James McCormick. Is Kate Gregory here? And Kelly Deepman. Historic Preservation Month. Whereas historic preservation is an effective tool for managing growth and sustaining development, revitalizing neighborhoods, fostering local pride, and maintaining community character while enhancing livability. And whereas historic preservation is relevant for communities across the nation, both urban and rural, and for Americans of all ages, all walks of life, and all ethnic backgrounds. And whereas historic preservation is inherently economically, environmentally, and socially sustainable, fostering a culture of reuse and maximizing the life cycle of all resources through conservation. Therefore, I, John A. Haliff, Mayor of Ames, of the City of Ames, Iowa, do hereby recognize May 2026 as National Historic Preservation Month, proclaim May 2026 as Ames Historic Preservation Month, and call upon the people of Ames to join their fellow residents across the United States in recognizing this special observance. Kelly, you gonna make some comments, or somebody else? Melissa. All right, you go ahead.
I'm going to see if you can give your proclamation. Just quick thank you to our Historic Preservation Commission. They work as a volunteer board and promote historic events in the city and review the design requirements we have in our historic districts. We really appreciate their efforts, and we know that Ames appreciates historic preservation when you see the Ames History Museum and the other efforts we see across the city, including the 3 property owners we're going to give awards to next. So thank you very much.
Mayor and Historic Preservation Commission pose for a picture.
Thank you.
Presentation showing the properties of the award winners on screen.
All right, as Kelly mentioned, we have the honor tonight of presenting 3 awards, Historic Preservation Awards. And the Ames Historic Preservation Commission's Historic Preservation Awards program annually recognizes preservation activities within Ames. The intent of the awards program is to highlight and honor these efforts and to promote and encourage future preservation efforts throughout the community. So tonight we have 3 awardees which are being recognized for their achievements in historic preservation within the Ames community. So I'd like to invite Pastor Betsy Thompson to come up here and join me, and I will read some facts about this exciting project. The 2026 Historic Preservation Award category of Keeping the Past Alive, we recognize 2 properties in the City of Ames. The first award recipient for Keeping the Past Alive is the Ames United Church of Christ for the historic preservation of the building at 217 6th Street. This award is for keeping the past alive preservation, which focuses on the maintenance and repair of existing historic materials and retention of a property's form as it has evolved over time. Keeping a historic building, one that has survived without detrimental changes or deterioration, in good condition by sustaining the existing form, integrity, and materials of historic property. The Ames United Church of Christ is believed to be the first congregation in Ames, beginning in 1865 as a wood structure. The brick church was constructed in 1899 in its original location. Today's appearance preserves the structure's historic character. No exterior changes have been made to the structure other than adding 2 additions, one in 1930 and one in 1958. Both additions were constructed to be consistent with the 1899 structure's character. The City of Ames supports this stewardship with the presentation of the Keeping Past Alive Award to Betsy Thompson. Congratulations, Betsy, and all those involved in preserving this property's history.
Mayor and Historic Preservation Commission pose for a picture. Presentation showing the properties of the award winners on screen.
The second award recipient for keeping the past alive is Kathy Sveck and Dorian Stripling for historic preservation of their single-family home at 603 Grand Avenue. Kathy, you want to join me up here? This Queen Anne-style home was constructed in 1894 by Charles and Sarah McCaskey. The property originally sat on a large plot of land that became McCaskey Subdivision in 1901. The current homeowners, Kathy Sveck and Dorian Stripling, moved there in 1986. They have undertaken many improvement projects over the years to preserve the 132-year-old structure's original character, including repairs to the exterior, chimney, and painting. It's because of their care and commitment that the house remains in excellent condition and contributes to the historic character and architectural resources in the City of Ames. The City of Ames supports this stewardship with this presentation of Keeping the Past Alive Award to Kathy Sveck and Dorian Stripling. Congratulations.
Mayor and Historic Preservation Commission pose for a picture. Presentation showing the properties of the award winners on screen.
And the last award night is a 2026 Historic Preservation Award recipient in the category of Crown Jewel of Ames. Mimi Wagner, you want to join me up here, please? This is for her restoration of her single-family home at 723 9th Street. The award for Crown Jewel of Ames restoration accurately depicts the form, features, and character of a property of a particular period of time in its history while removing evidence of other periods and reconstruction of missing features. This award is reserved for substantial projects with significant visual impacts. This craftsman bungalow was constructed in 1923. Over the years, the property was altered both on the exterior and interior, as well as being neglected. Mimi Wagner purchased the property in 2020 and began restoring the house to its original character, including restoring and updating the interior in 2021, starting exterior restorations in 2022, including changing the enclosed front porch back to the historic original accurate open front porch, and continues improving the structure to this day. Mimi has demonstrated an exemplary commitment to restoring her property to its original historic character, which serves as an excellent example of historic restoration that enhances her property as well as the neighborhood character. The City of Ames supports this stewardship with the presentation of Crown Jewel of Ames Award to Mimi Wagner. Congratulations, Mimi.
Mayor and Historic Preservation Commission pose for a picture. Mayor returns to the dais.
All right, we'll move on to consent agenda. Is there any item which council wishes to pull tonight?
Mayor, I'd like to pull 23 and 27, please.
Are there any other items? Hearing none, I entertain a motion to approve consent less items number 23 and 27.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 And I just wanted those in the audience, if you weren't aware that at our workshop last week, we had an extensive conversation about items 23 and 27. 23 has to do with continuing to support the construction of the new thermal generation plant. And we heard some of the nuances around that with price. Were you coming up to say something about that? Is Don? Okay, never mind. No, I didn't need you to do. I just was asking because I saw you there. And number 27, we were looking at the date of public hearing for the options related to our solar project, potential solar project, and just wanted people to know that that will be coming back for a hearing. So if you want to know more details, tune in to our YouTube channel from last Tuesday. That's it.
Thank you. Is there a motion on item number 23 and 27?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We'll move on to public forum. This is the time we set aside for public comment on topics of city business other than those listed on the agenda. Council cannot take any action on those due to the open meetings law, but might do so at a future meeting. And we would ask people to limit their comments to 3 minutes or less. And we have one person who wants to talk about or mention item number, it's under Disposition of Communications Council regarding pedestrian crossing because they cannot provide any feedback during disposition of communications. They can do so in public forums. So Brooke Elliston, if you'd like to address council on this topic.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Brooke Elliston. I'm back. And I'd like to give the Oak to Riverside neighborhood's thoughts on the disposition of communications to council, which is number 3, I believe, regarding the pedestrian crossing at South Russell and Lincoln Way. First off, we all really appreciate the time and analysis that staff has put into evaluating pedestrian safety at Lincoln Way and South Russell Avenue. However, we respectfully disagree with the conclusion that no near-term action should be taken. First, the reliance on the 2017 walk-bike roll plan does not reflect current conditions. Since that study, our area has experienced substantial change. The addition of a new indoor aquatic center, expanded events and concerts at Jack Trice Stadium, and the future development of Sci-Town have or will significantly increase pedestrian activity. These destinations draw students, families, visitors, and children, many of whom are unfamiliar with the area. Increased demand combined with reduced parking has led to more people walking through our neighborhood to access transit and nearby venues. These changes fundamentally alter the risk profile of the intersection compared to what was evaluated in 2017. Second, while lighting conditions were identified as a potential contributing factor in the deadly February 18th crash, lighting alone does not address the core safety issue, pedestrians currently lacking a safe, controlled opportunity to cross a high-volume arterial roadway, no different from the South 4th Street crossing 3 blocks south of this intersection. Both are 4-lane, both have the same speed limit, and both are without pedestrian refuge. However, one has flashing beacons and a painted pedestrian lane, and one has a death toll. The argument that improvements must strictly follow existing prioritization frameworks overlooks the purpose of responsive governance. Plans are intended to guide decision-making, not prevent it with new significant safety concerns arise, when significant safety concerns arise. The tragic loss of our neighbor Margaret is not an abstract data point. It is a clear and urgent signal that conditions at this intersection warrant immediate reconsideration. Finally, while we understand funding constraints, the cost of inaction must also be considered. The intersection serves a growing and increasingly diverse population of users. Targeted investments here would directly improve safety for residents, visitors, and the broader community, and can be pursued while still maintaining a thoughtful, system-wide approach. And we respectfully urge the City Council to vote yes to adding this memo to the agenda. And we really appreciate your time on this. Thank you.
Brooke. All right, Leanne Wilson, did you want to address council under public forum?
This is illegit. It has to do with the solar plan. It's nice seeing you all in 3 dimensions. I'm usually lurking online. At my age, it's nice to stay home and see these things happen. But what's going on with the climate is urgent and important, and we have an opportunity here. With our climate action plan now almost 3 years old, the city has accomplished a lot. I've been very impressed with a lot of what goes on. But there are some areas where we're kind of not on schedule, and solar power is one of them. And we really need to do something about that. And I have spent a number of hours in the last few weeks in groups listening and learning about this particular solar plan. And I think it's an excellent choice to get us moving and not delay for who knows how long getting more solar power for Ames. And so it's worth doing just for the climate action plan. But fortunately, this is the kind of thing that's a win-win because solar power, the fuel is free. It's not going away. Nobody can mess with our supply of sunlight. And so locally sourced energy, wind and solar, are both more stable, in the long run, more affordable than any kind of energy that depends on what somebody decides to do somewhere else in the world. And let us move forward.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to address council tonight under public forum? Please, you introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, my name is Bill Gutowski. I live at 904 Clark, and I also want to talk about the plans for the airport solar development, offering support for it. The basis for this is that I've worked as a climate scientist for many, many years, serving our country really on climate panels for the National Academy of Sciences, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And throughout all my years, I've seen that the impacts of climate change that have shown up and are continuing are great. And I think we need to be working to do what we can to show leadership in preventing that from happening, with the solar project being important in that regard. My concerns also are what sort of legacy we're leaving behind in all of this. Legacy for our children and our children's children. This is a great opportunity to leave a positive legacy. And I've seen that Ames in the past showed great leadership in the area of recycling with the development of the resource recovery plant. Long before I moved to Ames, I read about that plant in Scientific American. So what Ames did here was noticed by the rest of our nation and the broader community, the international community, through that publication. And so I think this is a great opportunity for the City of Ames, again, to show great leadership moving forward with a development that will support sustainable development, non-fossil fuel energy, and with all the advantages that Leanne just talked about. Again, a great opportunity for us to show leadership, not only for our community, but for the state and for the nation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? While this gentleman's coming up, as Councilwoman Rollins indicated, this item will be on the May 12th meeting. So you're welcome to come back and offer comments into. Please.
Hello, my name is Hector Arbor, and I live at 519 Oliver Circle. I'm here. I am going to talk about something that my mom asked me to bring to council, actually. So the intersection that is a little bit complex of Sheldon Avenue, Oakland Street, and Highland Avenue is one that my mom walks on every day. And at the point where the Sheldon Avenue extension and Sheldon Avenue reaches that kind of curve, my mom has let me know that she often feels like there's not very clear signage for the drivers, and so they often don't notice that people are trying to cross. I know that's probably a difficult intersection because part of it is controlled by Iowa State. And probably for a similar reason, the Highland Avenue area next to the Cyride bus stop on the east side also is not very well put together for people using Cyride due to the lack of a sidewalk, which again is probably a lot to do with Iowa State. So just making sure that that intersection area, including the crossing of Highland, is safe, especially considering that it's probably been some years since it's been looked at. So it would be great to, as looking at safety in other parts of the city, as well as looking at this part as well. And then I also want to also say my support for the solar farm. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hector. Anybody else? All right, close public forum. Move on to item number 38. Summary of Iron Subdivision Sewer Extension Alternatives. Kelly?
Kelly Diekman, Planning and Housing Director, approaches the staff table. Council action form displayed.
All right, so tonight we're returning to you about a year after this initial discussion about the annexation of the Ames Golf and Country Club in connection with some other North Ames property that was in the process of being annexed, which is really the property known as the Borgmeyer Farm, now known as proposed Greenbrier project, which is just to the south of the Country Club and the Iron Subdivision that we're talking about tonight. So the Iron Subdivision was originally created as a rural subdivision. It was approved through the City Council as well as the Board of Supervisors as part of the City Council approval to allow for it to proceed before it was annexed to the city. Certain covenants were established and agreed upon by Ames Golf and Country Club, which then also applied to the successors and assigns of property purchases. So one of the things the thing we're talking about tonight is in those covenants, the City Council required that at the City Council's future direction, that the homeowners in the Irons would be required to extend a sanitary sewer main and connect to it for city sanitary sewer service. That was what we were talking about last year with annexation, and there was a lot of unknowns about how that would work. When the first approval occurred, an easement was created to allow for one method of a sewer main to be extended through the project. And we'll look at that here in a second. And as that was being looked at, the homeowners obviously came forward and had questions and concerns about costs, timing, a number of things. So City Council asked your own staff, our Public Works Department, to make a conceptual design for this area and to put a cost estimate to it. So our Public Works Department used the original alignment, but then they thought of an alternative alignment, which appears to probably have a lower cost as an option 2, but would require some agreement among homeowners to reroute the plan for the site. So up here on the top, we labeled option 1 as the new alignment because it was the projected lower cost. And then option 2 is that original alignment through the easement. So I'm going to go to the drawings right now. So option 1. So to get your orientation, this is Cameron School Road right here, intersecting with G.W. Carver. Here you have Irons Court, which is a cul-de-sac with the single-family detached homes. And then as you go further north, you get to the Country Club driveway, and that provides access to 2 sets of townhomes off of that driveway. So in this option, rather than going through a central alignment that was originally planned to serve these homes, Public Works believed it was more feasible, or at least a lower cost, to run multiple sewer mains. So in this alignment, you're seeing a sewer main be extended on the east side of these Irons Court homes, and then it would wrap around and come up and terminate in this area. So you would serve basically these east homes with that alignment, and then you would extend further to the west and then run along the G.W. Carver right-of-way until you get up to the Country Club driveway, and then bring that line back into the site and serve this group of townhomes. These townhomes would be able to be served off of that alignment in G.W. Carver. The main reason this was cheaper is it doesn't have as much disruption, which would require pavement replacement. So for the most part, you can see the sewer is trenched into areas that are not paved, and with that just has a lower cost in terms of having to remove and replace the paving. So as I mentioned earlier, there aren't currently any easements to allow for this to occur. So it would require cooperation amongst the homeowners to agree to this, to establish the easement for this to occur. And then if we go to option 2, which is the original alignment, it still brings the sewer main over from Greenbrier. And when you get to Irons Court, then you follow the easement as it exists, and it routes through the front yards of these homes on Irons Court, and then it routes up and around and then back into the townhomes. So the services for many of the homes are probably in the rear. Some of them did, I think, from what we heard, may have planned at the front corner of a home to possibly go across the street or to connect at the front. So it's not a guarantee that every home would have the same financial impact on an alignment. We can estimate the overall cost, but the private service line costs would be each homeowner's responsibility with their plumber to make that connection, and they would deal with their own property situation to make those connections. And those costs aren't in the total cost of the project. So when we show this nearly $1 million and nearly $1.4 million versions, that is for essentially the public improvement costs. And then homeowners would have their own costs of abandonment of septic systems and then making those service line connections. So staff isn't recommending any one particular option. We've tried to present what we think are reasonable estimates of a way to do this. Per the covenants that exist, it does not say that the city would do the project. It says that the homeowners would, so they could either take on the project of their own design and submit the plans for approval and inspection by the city. An alternative that has been discussed but not formally presented is to look at it as a special assessment project. So a special assessment is an option to have the city do the project and then be reimbursed over time as an assessment on taxes to pay that back. So as a city project, we would publicly bid it and administer the project. And once it's done, you certify costs, and then those types of costs are then allocated out and put onto people's taxes. You have to set a schedule. Typically it's 10, possibly 15 years for payback on that type of thing. If the homeowners want to do the project themselves, like I said, they could submit plans. We would review it and approve it. They could go construct it on their own, and we wouldn't be involved in the actual bidding and the construction process. So at that point, I think that's the quick summary of everything that we looked at for the options. We did hold a outreach meeting in January to review this information. We initially sent it out to the contact list we had for all the property owners in December, and had a property owner meeting in January. We've included a summary of those comments with the council action form. There's a lot of things that you would expect. How does this work? When was the timing? I think timing is one of the biggest questions. How do service line connections work? How does septic system abandonment work? So a number of those kinds of really specific details about what happens once this project is ever started. So if there are any questions for me.
Any questions? You can just go ahead.
Sorry, I know that we're not getting into the nitty gritty of the cost for the lines, whether you do special assessment or the HOA funding it, but typically, do you think that there's any advantage to the city doing it and then having a special assessment because we get, I don't know, better pricing on that sort of project? Or are there downsides because of the kinds of requirements that we have to meet that private purchasers of this sort of service would not?
So when you say advantage, you mean advantage to the city or the homeowners?
I'm thinking to the homeowners.
I think that this is the way I would look at it. The cost is likely higher because of our public bidding requirements. As you know, our city projects, we have certain requirements under state law for bonding of the improvements and the process to go through everything we do for construction administration. So typically we believe the city pays a higher price than what gets privately negotiated. So on a dollars and cents level, it's probably cheaper if you can administer the project yourself. The quality should be the same. The specs are the same. You must build a sanitary sewer line to DNR standards and to city standards, regardless of who the contractor is, and we would inspect that installation. I think the benefit to the homeowner is essentially in a special assessment, the city operates as the bank. You don't have to come up with the cash immediately yourself. You don't have to go get a home equity loan or something to pay for that. So it may cost more in total, but in the special assessment process, if we do that, the cost gets spread out and you don't have an initial cost. And again, we don't know what the preference of any any group of homeowners is between those two options.
Thank you.
And in January, when we provided this, we did put quantities with each of these things. We shared all the details that we had. We said it would behoove them if they wanted to contact a contractor, use our conceptual design to get their own estimates and see how it compared to what we had for city costs. We didn't hear anything back on that, so I don't know if they did that or not, but that's something that could easily be done by someone, is to go get get an actual kind of bid based on our design.
All right, open public comment. We have several people that want to address council tonight. We'll start with Randy Braden. If you want to please come up and offer your comments, and then we have a few more that are signed up online.
Get things in order here. Well, thank you for the opportunity to provide input on the proposed annexation and sewer hookup. My name's Dr. Randy Braden. I'm a retired teacher, coach, principal, superintendent, serving schools all around the state. My wife, Marcia, and I moved to Ames in 2019 and lived at 5407 Irons Way. The decision to pursue the annexation and required sewer hookup has created a great deal of anxiety in the Irons development. My comments, of course, are my own feelings, but they're similar to my friends and neighbors in the Irons development and the Irons Way townhomes. If this becomes a reality, without a doubt, it's going to be a hardship. I've got some estimates and facts, and I didn't see a plan, but I'm going to give my estimates tonight. As I'm thinking about all this, the distance from Cameron School Road to the northern part of Irons Way homes is around 2,000 feet. That only serves those on the west side of that development. To get the line to the east side, and I know he presented something different that I hadn't seen, could add another 2,000 feet. So each homeowner, as you just heard, will be required to pay for the extension and installation of that main sewer line for 4,000 feet. A conservative estimate, and I'm not sure that's going to cover it now, was $30,000 for each homeowner. The $30,000 is separate from pumping our septics, drilling holes, filling them with sand, then hooking on, and possible damage to our irrigation and sprinkler systems. Marcia and I planned well for retirement. These extreme costs are going to really disrupt our plans. For example, I went ahead and looked at our tax estimate. If we're annexed, it's going to add $1,800, so our taxes will be around $8,000. I had always heard 30,000 over 10 years, which I think was talked about, having to spread it out over the years. That's another 3,000 a year. I know I'm not going to hold you responsible for our HOA fees, but those are approaching $4,000. That is $15,000 for each of us that are retired and on fixed income. In fact, about 90% of the residents in Irons Way and several in Irons Court are retired and facing the same thing that my family is. Now, the possibility after we moved to Ames to be near our family that lives in Gilbert, the possibility of relocating from Ames is a real possibility now. And hopefully in a new location, things like this will be disclosed before we close our sale. My abstract wasn't available to me until closing. The person on the other side of my townhome went to pick his up 5 days later. And so I hope, and the realtor, by the way, did not disclose anything about this decision made in the neighborhood of 14 years ago. I have served on several city community committees over my career, mostly on planning and zoning. And I could always list several things for the areas being annexed that would be an advantage, or maybe new services. I cannot name one advantage for the Irons Way development or any new services. My estimated additional $1,800 in property tax will not receive one new service, not even snow removal for our streets. So I'd like to offer a challenge for the council and maybe a question before I close. The challenge is to ask each and every one of you sitting up here to change places with us. Sit back, now you're retired on a fixed income. And how would you feel about what's happening and how would you address that? I understand the incentive to annex us. I can tell you, I understand it. It's going to add about $20 million of tax base.
I've given you your 5 minutes now. Could you please draw your comments to close?
What I can't wrap my head around is what advantage is it to the city of Ames to have us hook onto the sewer? I understand the annexation. I don't understand hooking to the sewer. So I'd ask that you give careful consideration to what you're about to do to our neighbors and friends.
Thank you. Mr. Huey, you're next.
I'm Lee Huey. I live at 5411 Irons Way with Jennifer Grote, who's here tonight. She is the owner of the property, and I have permission to talk about this issue. I just want you to consider maybe an option 3, and that would be to leave our septic systems alone. I see no pollution situations in the future from our septic systems as they're presently constructed. So what's the reason that we're pulling all these septic tanks up just to satisfy an ordinance? Maybe you can come up with a variance, but I think it's very serious, and I think Randy well put what the consequences are for us in this development. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Tim Hansen.
Good evening. I live at 5406 Irons Way, and I bought it in 2017, and we've lived there happily on my pension that doesn't have any inflation protection in it ever since. And I'm going to start with some good news. The idea of putting a septic line out in the back of our homes was a breath of fresh air if we have to have a septic line put in. And I say that because when I originally heard about this deal and the septic lines going through the front of the homes, I called on a friend of mine who's a plumber. And so I told him what's got to happen, okay? Got a line out here in the street. By the way, we own the street, so I'm going to have to repair that. And so let's go out back. And so my lines go out the back of my basement to a septic that works really well, by the way. But the sewer line's going to be out the front. And so he went down the basement, looked at the drywall he's going to have to tear out. And he basically said, Tim, I'm not going to do it because I can tell you if I'll do it, we'll never be friends again. And because the cost would be insurmountable to go through that. It's unimaginable for a retired guy. And I guess, so at least the lines out the back was a positive if there has to be a line. I too don't understand why there has to be a line because these septics work great. The water goes through ultraviolet light. It's tested every year. The water is clean. And I really wish it would be left alone. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Daryl Veggie, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Like Miss Ellison, I'm back again. But seriously, this is a serious issue for all of us out there. I want to thank Mr. Diekman and Mr. Clausen for putting together the January meeting where they told us about the alternatives. I am going to correct Mr. Diekman on one thing he said at that meeting, and he said I don't know exact words. Several residents came to request annexation. Well, that is not true. The annexation is coming from the staff of the city here, not from anybody at Irons or Irons Way. So I'm here too. We do not want to have to pay for this. Kind of like Mr. Braden, I think it looks like $30,000 at least, plus connection fees, plus getting rid of septic systems and stuff like that. It's a hardship. And the other thing is we have a pretty nice looking area out there, and you're going to start running lines through there. What the estimate is 2 months of construction, tearing things up, utilities, sprinkler systems, streets, sidewalks, lawns. It's going to be a mess. We just hate it. Lee Healy offered one option. I'm going to offer another, and that is just to don't annex us. We are just a bump along the west side. We are like 21/100ths of a mile long. We are less than 100 yards wide. And if you didn't annex us, we'd be right along there with the Christ Community Church, and nobody would know the difference. So I'm going to say when the time comes, please, please, please don't annex us. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else wants to address council on this topic tonight? All right, we'll close public forum or public comment. Kelly, any closing comments? No action required tonight.
Yeah, I don't have any other comments, just here for questions.
Questions from council?
Well, a few things. First of all, Kelly, thank you for the work that you and your staff have done. We asked you to sharpen the pencil, and you came back, and your new proposal saves $500,000 in the project, and I don't want to miss that. And so we appreciate the work that you did and the creativity of your staff. This is starting to feel a little bit like Groundhog Day. We were having the same conversation. And so since it's Groundhog Day, I will repeat the things that I have said all along. These houses would not exist if we had not gone along with your developers and the golf course's proposal. There wouldn't be any houses there at all. So you wouldn't be living in these houses. It would be all bare space, period. And if you don't believe me, you can go back and watch the video. This was not our proposal. It was their proposal. And if we had the opportunity to go back in time, I would be strongly opposed to doing this proposal because it hadn't worked. And I raised the concern in that meeting that the restrictive covenants would provide prospective buyers with adequate notice. And there is at least one of you tonight that I know had a notice of those covenants and is a bit disingenuous to come here now and say that you didn't know, because you clearly did. But I think that your issue is not with us, certainly not with our staff, but it's with the developer and the Golf and Country Club. The Golf and Country Club has never appeared here in the council, to my knowledge. Where are they to speak to their involvement in their proposal? The developer came here one time. Your dispute is not with us. If you feel like there were not accurate representations about the requirements of this property, respectfully, it is not with us, it is with the developer and the Golf and Country Club. So, and as far as the annexation, I mean, we're not going to leave this property as an island. And so it is a very difficult situation, and we are sympathetic with the situation. And I think it's a fair question to say, if we were in your situation, we would be frustrated too. The question is, who should you be frustrated with? And so we can continue to have these conversations, but that's the lay of the land. And I think it would be very instructive for people to go back and watch the video where this meeting took place. This was something that I forecasted would happen, and this is exactly what happened. And Now, if there was ever a situation in the future where a developer wanted us to be accommodating to them so they could do a development, this is Exhibit A of why we would never do that again.
Any other questions or comments? All right, Kelly. No action taken, and your report, I think, stands out known, explaining.
What are next steps, just
Yeah,
so
as-
folks are aware of how this will play going forward?
Sure. So I wanted to bring this back. You gave us this task. So Public Works generated this for us all to look at. As I said in the report, it can't physically happen until some element of Greenbrier development occurs. So like the green line at the south end of Irons Court there, that's an extension of a trunk main that needs to come through Greenbrier. I would say, I said in the report, 27, 28 is the soonest. It seems like that's highly unlikely. So we might be talking 28, 29 before even that line could exist. At any time, staff would answer questions, respond to any of the homeowners that have questions or proposals about what to do. But I don't know that I would come back to you with any particular request of direction until there's more certainty on the Greenbrier extension. And I just don't know when that's going to be. The annexation question is separate. They're two different things. So last spring, you accepted the covenants required people to submit applications. The country club did. A couple of other people did as well. Enough applications were submitted by land area to proceed with annexation under state law. You asked me to hold off on starting that until Greenbrier was annexed. That was completed late last year. So we're in a position now that we could move forward with the annexation. I'll check in with you about when we're going to start that, but that likely starts probably this summer. It takes 4 to 6 months to go through the annexation process because it has to go through the state.
Very good. All right, we'll move on to item number, next item. No, pardon me?
Can I ask just 1 2-second question?
No. The public, no.
John Mayer, further comment in regard to the country club and the annexation and the cost for sewer?
Yeah, yes, because we had public comment. Public comment has been closed. So if you want to send your comments in, you can certainly email them to council. There's no action being taken tonight. We're going to move on to item number 39.
Amelia Schoeneman, city planner, approaches the staff table.
An Explorer. You want this? That's not it. Auburn Trail Plat. Is that what you want? That one or this one? What?
And if the developer put the sewer lines out, you know, those are issues too. Like, that was the developer.
Okay, good evening. This is the Auburn Trail Subdivision. So we're located just off of Hyde, in North Ames, north of the Bloomington Heights subdivision. It's a residential subdivision, 178 lots. And the preliminary plat that is up on the screen conforms with the master plan that's also on tonight's agenda with third reading of a rezoning. Just wanted to note that any approval tonight of the preliminary plat is contingent upon later approval receiving of that rezoning and master plan as well. And the preliminary plat does fit with the density shown on the master plan, the open spaces. It is conforming. I'll just note a few some high points of the subdivision. So there is a main collector street that connects to Hyde. It's called Tilden Parkway. It runs through the center of the subdivision and will connect to the Rosemary development to the north. This is a little unique in that we are allowing lots to take frontage off of Tilden. This is because there's low projected traffic volumes and they are proposing 2 mini roundabouts for traffic calming as well. So you can see those mini roundabouts at the intersections of, I believe,
Denali and Glacier.
Preliminary plat for Auburn Trail subdivision is shown,
There are 2 blocks in this subdivision.
indicating blocks along the top of the preliminary plat.
If you can see nope. That exceed, oh, thank you. Just those 2 blocks. Glacier Drive and where Kelly's mouse is right there. Those 2 blocks exceed our 660-foot maximum length for a block and don't have a mid-block crossing for pedestrians, but they are requesting alternative design approval, which is, allows 20% flexibility on those standards. And that's because of the conservation areas and the way the streets are laid out in this subdivision. There is also a recreation space proposed on the west side of the subdivision on Outlot B. This space will be a private pocket park. It's approximately ½ acre and usable area. And so some improvements are needed to make it achieve that vision of a pocket park. And we'll determine exactly what those look like with final platting. And my final note is this is within the Hayden watershed. So it does fall under a low impact development and conservation subdivision standards. And the stormwater plan submitted does meet those standards. It has multiple practices, sediment basins, forebays, detention ponds in a row to help us better reduce pollutants of concern for this watershed. So the Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed this plat and did recommend approval. And we are also recommending approval with several conditions this evening. And again, contingent on approval of rezoning later on the agenda. I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Amelia. Questions?
Am I reading correctly that the pocket park is accessed by a trail or a sidewalk or something that curves from Crestmore over to Glacier? And so there are those 2 entrances to that little area?
Yeah.
Yeah, they split the design on 2 pages. So this hatched area is what we're identifying as the flatter area of Outlot B. And this walkway right here goes through that area and then connects back up to the north.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to point out in the report we said this, just want to reiterate it. It's a private park. It is not a public park because of its size and the way it's situated in the project.
How would people access that park without going, is there a public, there's a pretty steep embankment. Oh, I'm sorry, I see the pathway. Thank you. Other questions?
So this is a great project for the city. Lots of homes. We need this. So it's very exciting. My question, speaking about restrictive covenants, is about the covenants here. So in other areas in the watershed, we provide limitation about the lawn chemicals that homeowners can use. Will this subdivision also be in that same category where their covenants will limit their use of certain nitrogen-based chemicals that would adversely affect the watershed?
Yes, that standard for conservation design subdivisions was not amended with our recent change. So that will still apply with the final plat. We'll get those covenants in and review that provision is in there.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All right, well, about public comment, we have one person who has indicated interest in addressing council, Diane McCauley. To address council, and then after that, we would invite others who might want to offer input on this particular project.
Hi.
Hi.
I mailed some comments, but they unfortunately were late last night. I'm not sure if anybody had a chance to take a look at those. It might be helpful to have a map in front of you that was included in that.
Hands a stack of maps to council.
That one. And that's an annotated map with some comments. I'm the president of the Bloomington Courtyard Association Board and HOA. I'm speaking on behalf of our board that represents 52 townhomes. Bloomington Courtyard's located at the intersection of Hyde and Harrison and goes up to adjoin the development on the east side of Hyde. The first plat, preliminary plat that was presented a couple years ago included a trail from this development to Ada Hayden. Our board urges the council to reinstate that path to Ada Hayden that was in their first plans and is missing from the current plans, and I can tell you why. Already, the development to the west of us does not have direct access to Harrison Road. We already have a number of people from west of our development. Kelly, can we kind of highlight where Bloomington Courtyard is somehow with your mouse?
So here.
Or something. Anyway, we have a number of people from the west that shortcut through our townhome. Yeah. And we're only the west half. I'm not talking on behalf of the other townhomes. There are 2 townhome associations there. We have a lot of people that shortcut through our development to Ada Hayden. And without the path that was in the original plan, we really strongly and logically, in my mind, believe that without the dedicated trail to Ada Hayden, that the Auburn Trail residents are likely to take that same shortcut through our complex. It's about a half a mile up to the other entry to Ada Hayden from the development. And I don't know that it's logical to assume that people will walk half a mile north to go to Ada Hayden when they could instead cut through our complex directly and go right to the lakes. Our complex was built 25 plus years ago. The roads and sidewalks are privately maintained by our association through association fees. And as you can guess, the maintenance of roads is pretty challenging. And ours is no exception for an HOA to maintain. And admittedly, they're not great. They're cracked. We've got spalling. They weren't built to standard road specifications by a crappy company. So our HOA has budgeted like $25,000 for concrete patching this year, but that in no way will fix all the cracks and deterioration. And additionally, Google Maps is wrong about the city's official trails, making the problem worse. I don't know if that can be corrected. I imagine that's all over the city. Respectfully, our HOA board believes it is improper and really unfair for our townhome complex to take on additional foot traffic. We may have some additional vehicle travel as a shortcut, but we hope that will not be the case. Our main concern are trips and falls that could subject our association to liability for injuries to non-residents. Our residents, through their association fees, should not be subjected to potential liability, increased maintenance, and costs because of the Auburn Trail development. And there is a simple fix. We strongly urge the council to consider reinstating that path to Ada Hayden on the developer's property north of our complex and the creek, so that that shortcut is not impacting us.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
It
Okay.
does. Thank you.
Couple other quick comments. I have had a number of residents express concern about the additional traffic on Hyde Avenue. We're not really, I apologize. I did receive the traffic study after I had drafted the letter, so thank you. And our concern is not so much near the new development where the left turn lane is rightfully going to go. It's more concerned south on the existing Hyde Avenue. If you drive that road with parking on one side of the street, traffic often comes to a standstill or slows down. It's just not a great arterial because people do not know that they have enough clearance to go past the parked car. So it's kind of this thing like this a lot of times. And it's one of the main routes to Gilbert schools, where many area resident children attend. There's more traffic than you would expect at certain times of the day. And a Hyde has always been a problem with vehicles speeding. It just seems to be a racetrack a lot of times. Those factors together kind of give us some real concerns. And in fact, if we put a pedestrian trail to Ada Hayden with a pedestrian crossing warning and maybe a light, might alleviate some of the speeding problems as well.
You're at like almost 8 minutes. Could you draw your comments to your close?
That's fine.
You said you had one more item you want?
I do have one more item, and I'll be really quick.
Thank you.
I am concerned about the large field that will be seeded into natural grasses and plants on the east side of Hyde. I don't know how well I would trust an HOA that would take over that large field to get a planting developed, mature, and maintained, because native plants are not easy. Like right now, there's probably 20 or 30 trees out there that are scrub trees. And I'm concerned about that. I guess my question and maybe my concern is, does the city have standards for the maintenance of large-scale native plantings by HOAs? And if not, I believe that's needed. If there are standards, maybe they need to be readdressed to better make sure that it is adequately maintained.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else who wants to address council on this topic tonight? Justin?
Good evening, Council. Justin Dodge, Hunsaker Companies, 105 South 16th Street. Been a lot of years. Happy to have this project in front of you at this point in time and to be viable too. Just a couple of things to respond to some of Diane's comments. And she also spoke at Planning and Zoning. And so we've been able to have some conversations there, as well as phone calls, or a phone call in between the meetings. So as far as the crossing and going into the park, so earlier on when we were proposing that, we didn't know when the property to the north of us was going to be developed. We didn't know when the path along Hyde on the west side of Hyde was going to go all the way up. But now with the city taking that project on, working with city staff, they said, hey, now that we are taking that project on, we would rather have one crossing point on Hyde for both us as well as Hayden's Preserve. And so that's why we removed that path leading into the park, because it's in the city's control of when the path along Hyde gets paved, and then also to just have one pedestrian crossing over Hyde rather than two. So that's why that took place. As far as the seating and the outlot, Diane brought this up at Planning and Zoning as well. So we stay involved and engaged within the developments until build out. And so obviously that's multi-year process. And so I've assured her that I will be a part of this subdivision, making sure that the native plants and all the other seating is established as it's meant to be and the engineers design it to be. So anyway, happy to have the project and look forward to building it later on this year. Thanks much.
Thanks, Justin. Anybody else?
Thank you. I'll just take a
Can
minute.
you just introduce yourself? And
I'm Melanie Cornwell, and I'm president of the Bloomington Townhomes Association, which is adjoined to the Bloomington Courtyards.
Thank you.
We are 18 units, 9 buildings, and our side is also private streets and so on. We haven't met as a board, so I can only really speak as a citizen tonight. The board has discussed removing the walking path, which is where your circle ends and drops south, or your Africa or whatever that shape is. There we go.
Blue line. That was
There's a walking path that goes there. And, you know, we're considering taking that out based on the number of people that come through from the west already. We have problems with dogs not being cleaned up after. We have people that whiz through on bikes, and I don't know about you guys, but the bikes can really surprise you. So we've got driveways real close together. You know, and it's not that we don't want to see the public use the park. Harrison is a huge corridor for that, but we do not want to have more people coming through, nor do we really want to put up private property signs. But planning, I think, is it planning and zoning that told me we could do that because we own the streets. As far as what's happening to the north of us, I would echo everything and the west that Diane is talking about, and say that with this reworking of the waterway, that is a beautiful piece of work. I couldn't have been more impressed. But what we have is a lot of turned over soil, and you'll never guess what the bumper crop is. Thistles. They're a booger to get rid of. And so we would appreciate any help that the incoming development and that the city can provide to help us with those struggles.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Good evening. I'm Chris Gleason, 4146 Eisenhower Lane, number 5. I'm in the Bloomington Courtyard Association as well. And I just want to clarify, when the developer said and the city said about traveling north to where Ada Hayden goes in at that parking area, are you guys going to put in a sidewalk from the development all the way up to there on the east side or the west side?
I believe it's on the west side, right? West side.
Okay, so that's a good plan. I'm glad to hear that. But again, I echo my friends that were up here earlier talking about the concern about folks going through our associations because of the liability issues, and we don't want to have to put up no trespassing signs or electric fences. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public comment.
I want to just make sure I'm understanding right in terms of the path they're talking about. We're not talking about the sidewalk along Harrison, right? But rather the little, there's a little teeny path that just goes right there, right? Is that, okay, good.
Indicating trail along bottom of the preliminary plat.
Okay. Okay.
So, yeah, on the map that's handed out, she's saying the green line at that east side is what they're talking about at the private sidewalk.
That little teeny.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's hard. Yeah,
Good.
Yeah.
What question did you have?
Well, that was my primary question. I just wanted to make sure we weren't talking about the sidewalk along Harrison, but rather just that little jutting out
I think
part.
it's a little
So,
button hook that comes up and
Yeah.
ties into that parking
Okay.
lot is what I think.
yeah,
Steve's
that
talking
was
about.
just to clarify. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Kelly, could you clarify the status of that pathway that's in question? My understanding is that when
Just to be clear, Tim, you mean the pathway that was removed that was on outlot G initially?
Yeah, thanks for clarifying.
Thank you.
So once again, the pathway in question, do you want to just highlight again, just so we're on the same page?
So in the 2021 plan, there was a private HOA trail that did something like this to connect down to Harrison. So that's the path that they're referring to that was in the original plan. And there was going to be a crossing installed here, pedestrian flashing beacons, the whole 9 yards because of the speed and the visibility in this area. And so that's the area that staff said we could accommodate it. It was not our preference from the Parks and Rec staff to have this path come through here for maintenance reasons. And then because we're building the trail on the west side, I think we're expecting to build that within the next 2 years. Then you had connections both to the north and the south to Harrison, as well as to the Upland Trail, which is off this map. The Upland Trail head is up here. So then, as Justin said, they chose to remove the trail from their plan after discussing it with staff.
So could you clarify, and maybe this is a city attorney issue, but what is the legal status of the small trail piece in question? Is there a public
You're talking
access?
about this piece of trail, like right where my pencil is?
Yes.
This is a private sidewalk that's part of that townhome development.
And so, I agree with what you said. It makes
Okay.
sense. My question is different. When that subdivision was created, was there a public easement across that sidewalk?
I think Amelia looked into that, and we didn't find any easements for public use on roads or sidewalks within the developments. I'm not saying we did an exhaustive search, but we did not see any when we looked for it.
So, I mean, as a general principle, we have lots of subdivisions that have bicycle paths through them, and the public can go across them. And so this threat that we would build an electric fence to somehow be a barrier to people accessing our lake through that, if there was a public easement there, then obviously they would be precluded from the electric fence. But if there is no public easement, then they can build their electric fence. Is that correct?
Can't build an electric fence. You can have a fence.
Pardon me?
You can't build an electric fence. You can have a fence.
Okay. Well,
Yeah. So if the homeowners association wanted to, they would be allowed to build a 4-foot fence with gates across the frontage of their properties if they wanted to control access.
okay.
That's the way to do it.
And so as of tonight, we are not aware of any public access to that point.
We did not see that there was that in the approvals.
Other quick questions from council? Comments?
So the concern about the open field, so can you speak to the issue? Justin has indicated a willingness to make sure that that is properly maintained, but at some point that is handed off. What kind of oversight or can we provide some kind of direction that that area will be maintained according to certain standards?
I think I would have to get back to you on the specifics. So there's a couple of different layers here that I would say are not your average situation. So in the Ada Hayden watershed and the low impact conservation subdivision standards, we require an extra conservation management plan at the time of final plat that includes details on the plantings, the maintenance, the mowing, those kinds of schedules. Now, the type of grass that is proposed on Outlot G is tall prairie grass. It is not your normal HOA lawn. So usually an HOA would be subject to our citywide property maintenance code. Native plants have a little bit of a carve out in that code. So I'd have to talk a little bit with other staff that does property maintenance to understand if there's any unique rules or expectations related to that. But that's like ongoing. So while it's being established, the developer has to have a financial security. You have to get to an established setting of this prairie grass before the city would release the developer from the responsibility of establishing it. But then ongoing maintenance everywhere else in the city, it's just the city's property maintenance code. So if there's a request or a condition about something unique to this site, I would need to look into what that would mean, and we'd have to look at how that could be established in covenants that we haven't done in the past that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Thistles are considered noxious, though.
Thistles
So
will
thistles
always-
are not
thistles
allowed.
are
They're
always-
never allowed.
Correct. Doesn't
They're
matter.
by the state.
Thistles is a
They're-
noxious weed. So it is not allowed. We would always enforce on a thistle complaint to a homeowner, to an HOA, to a business, whoever that is. That isn't exempt because you're in a conservation area.
Exactly. Thank you. Yeah.
So what
Just wanna
advice
make
did
sure
you
they
give to
heard
the comment that it already has thistles growing in it right now? What should they do to bring that to the city's attention or to the developer's attention? Because that is, as was indicated, a noxious weed and should be not allowed to be growing.
Right. So that would be a property maintenance code violation that you would report to the inspections division of the city, and then they would contact the property owner about how to rectify that.
But seeing as the property owner is here and I think has expressed an interest in being cooperative, they probably are.
Yeah, I think everybody's aware of it. There was some timing related to our creek restoration, or not creek, our bank improvement project.
Yeah.
So Kelly, these people made an effort to be here tonight. Let's at least flesh this out a bit with respect to the crossing. So we have to do a lot of balancing. And so one concern is that not having the north piece, what you put in red, is going to cause a burden perhaps to the subdivision to the south. And so what are the pros and cons of putting that in there now that we know the development plans and the plan for the multi-use trail? You just walk us through that again.
The pros and the cons. The two factors that staff thought were not ideal were the crossing at that point that I show you. So the speed is you're coming over a hill. There is visibility. Traffic said yes, it can be done. They would want to install a flashing beacon to alert people because there is no other kind of signal of any type that anybody would be in this area. So they would have to identify that, make it a very high visibility crossing for them to be satisfied that safety had been addressed. And then Parks and Rec, as you can see, you see nothing about topography on this map. So there is a bit of a hill as you come into the park. That's why I drew that curve. I don't know that I drew it right, but there's a hill there that we'd have to match grades on. And Parks and Rec wanted a paved path to make sure there wasn't erosion. And they just wanted to make sure it was clear that was not a maintained regular path like they would be within Ada Hayden. But it was expected that was a city maintenance requirement if it was installed.
So, but that's a fairly low bar. I mean, if we put up those flashing signs, I mean, that's an inexpensive remedy. Part of the allure for people buying into Auburn Trail is the access to Ada Hayden. It's a fantastic location. And so it's reasonable that people are going to want to find an expedient route to Ada Hayden. So help us think through, are there other downsides to having a separate access there if that's all that's needed is that light? And then there's a trail put in?
I think that's where as part of this review process, you're trying to evaluate the burden to the public of an amenity for a private project. This was not in any trail plan or anything that the city put forth as an idea. This came from the developer. So again, it could be accommodated, but it isn't a plan of the cities where we had planned to make those investments or pay for those ongoing costs.
Okay. One comment on the traffic. We would certainly agree. Hyde was never designed to be an arterial street. And I will try to speak gracefully. Prior councils did not want to see Ames grow to the north. And so Hyde was not properly sized. And so this is a result of very poor foresight of our predecessors, and we're stuck with this. And there's really no practical way to redesign Hyde to make it an arterial street. So it's sort of a frustrating thing. We get complaints about traffic on Hyde every year. I don't have any good suggestions.
The only thing I can add is the Transportation Division does have a traffic calming study in the CIP for this area. So there will be an assessment of things that can be done to improve safety and manage speed. It's not going to necessarily change the volume of cars, but try to address some of the practical concerns that come up. I don't know the details on that, but because of these comments, the Transportation Division does have that in, I think it was identified in the walk and roll plan as something to address. We highlighted it in Plan 2040 as something that needed to be addressed as development occurs as well. So the city eventually will start to look at a project to the extent that it can help manage and improve that area.
Great, thank you.
All right, any closing questions? Otherwise, I entertain a motion. Is there a motion?
I'll move alternative 1,
Which is, in essence,
approving the preliminary plat for Auburn Trails subdivision.
with the
With the
5
adjacent-
different conditions that are listed in the council
A
action
through
plan.
E.
Is there a second? And just to be clear, this does not include any additional path that was talked about on the east side, just so we're clarity here on this tonight. Okay. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Can you just, next steps then, Amelia? Just where are the next steps then? What's going to happen?
Can you say that again? Sorry, we were talking.
What are the next steps for this project?
You have third reading on the agenda in a few minutes, I hope. And there are no public hearings left. The developer would be able to start grading on the site once preliminary plat is approved and work towards installing public improvements. Eventually, final plat comes back for verification of improvements.
Thank you. All right, move on to item number 40.
Vanessa Baker Latimer, Housing Coordinator, approaches the staff table.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Before you tonight is basically the follow-up from staff bringing to you the February 26th council meeting on approved requests for proposals to sell up to 6 lots.
Diagram of Baker Subdivision lots
market
shown.
rate lots in the Baker Subdivision on the north side. These lots were planned to be sold in 2027. So we did 9 lots were identified to be made available to the successful developer that would be allowed to select up to 6 of those 9 lots. The request for proposals was designed to respond to each lot, quality and timing, because they're a little bit different sizes and so forth. And they will be owned by private parties and not part of the city's responsibility. So it would allow an individual who wanted to purchase a lot and hired a builder or developer to buy the lots to meet those minimum requirements of the RFP. And then we were bringing that back to you for your final decision on how we should proceed with any request that we receive. And the financial interest from the sale of these lots would go directly back to our community development block grant program as program income, which we have been talking through our action plan and so forth on how to make sure that we get those funds spent in time to meet our CDBG timeliness test from that we talked about a month ago with our infrastructure projects. So we did issue the RFP on March 9th, and March 31st, we received 2 proposals, one from Genesis Homes and one from Keystone Equity Group. So we created a review committee made of planning and housing, public works, and inspections, and we reviewed them individually and then met to compare notes. And then from there, we did a team interview with each developer to have any clarifications from our discussion and our individual proposals. From there, I'm going to let Kelly talk.
From there. What a handoff.
Because I don't want to mess that up.
All right. So I think ultimately we only got 2 proposals, and probably the key is that each group, after we interviewed them, said it was 6 lots or none. I think we were maybe hoping we could mix and match. We were happy to see 2 proposals. We thought overall the proposals were both good for the development. So I think as the scoring committee worked through it, the Keystone proposal was a little more complete. They had submitted the information as required and made minimum lot purchase price bids that either matched or exceeded them, and then they provided multiple floor plans and elevations for us to evaluate. So each developer discussed that these are the plans they have. They're willing to and Keystone did revise one of their submittals that was scored lower with a higher scoring house. You see that as a condition if you picked alternative 1 to make sure this other house type was included. So they both said there's things they could do. There's options here, but we had to evaluate what's submitted. So this is what we got to in terms of scoring. The 2 proposals overlapped on 3 lots. So you have I think lot 23, 26, and 16 were directly comparable in the sense of price offered. Genesis also offered on 17, 21, and 22, which were 3 of the bigger lots, but they didn't increase their offer in relation to the lot size. So there was a big difference between our estimated minimum price and their offer. Keystone intentionally basically picked smaller lots so they could stay on a price point that they were looking for, similar to how Genesis approached those same lots. So ultimately, we evaluated the different elevations, made some assumptions about how house types would be done. We've recommended a condition that with either party that's selected, there's an agreement that goes with that staff does ensure a house is actually built at the time of issuance of the building permit that matches what you're seeing. We didn't necessarily say that in the RFP, but I think that's the clear intent, that if you're showing us one house, that we're going to get something that looks like that. So that would be an expectation with either developer that you pick. Overall, I think the lot price was the biggest differential here, because Genesis just approached it as a lump sum offer regardless of lot type, compared to how the RFP was looking at it as a lot by lot comparison. I think the way I would look at this is if alternative 1, which is Keystone, has a higher bid, if you find the proposal of homes to meet the intent of the RFP, which I would say is in that first scoring criteria of does it have a residential character with traditional residential features that are desirable and are compatible with the neighborhood, then that proposal would be the highest because it has a higher price offer and it has those homes. If you don't feel like their homes have accomplished that, then you would have to start to evaluate the Genesis proposal and see if they've accomplished more with purpose of the RFP. And then we have to weigh how that pricing difference really is accommodated, because they approached it a little bit different by not really offering the minimum prices in the RFP. But at the end of the day, it's a council decision on how to proceed. We're happy to answer any questions if there's other information that we can offer.
Thank you. Questions?
I had one question. My recollection was that there was going to be a restrictive covenant. This is our theme tonight of restrictive covenants, that these would be owner-occupied homes. Is that in fact the case? Am I right on that?
Yep, that's already been recorded on the property.
Okay. And what is the enforcement mechanism? So will there be an HOA? Will the city enforce? So
there's no HOA. We would be able to enforce it as the city, because we are the property owner. So outside of our governmental authority, it would be as our property owner, we put this restriction on it. We as the city would not issue any rental permits for it. So if someone came in, we wouldn't issue that permit. So then you would have an option of enforcing the covenant, or if somebody is renting something illegally using our normal municipal code violation process.
So let me go on the weeds just a bit. So is there a way in your system, let's say I bought one of those houses and I want to rent it, I have to get a letter of occupancy from the city in order to do that. Would there be some kind of system that says, oh, this is this property and we can't issue a letter of occupancy as a rental property? Is that?
Yeah, I think we can.
So a letter of compliance rather.
Yeah, so we have a permit system that we can put holds on property to try to identify unique situations. I believe we could put that in our permit system to flag these properties if someone tried to apply for that.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? Vanessa, is there any requirement under CDBG for how much revenue we have to get back from the sale of these that would lead us to decide that we have to go with the Keystone proposal because the other didn't meet that bar that we set with our estimates?
From trying to have communications with HUD, usually if we're repurposing, like we did a couple of years ago, we sold our lot across the street, turned into a parking lot. Because the use of that was for affordable housing, HUD required that it had to be sold at market rate. So these lots were always initially going to be sold as market rate homes. So as long as we've done a process, there's nothing, to my knowledge from hearing from HUD, that we have to have a minimum price or whatever. It's just that income has to come back as program income. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, open up public comment. Anyone want to address council on this topic tonight? Justin?
Good evening again, Council. Justin Dodge, Hunziker Companies, 105 South 16th Street. Just some initial thoughts. I've never heard of Keystone Equity. I'm sure they're a reputable outfit, but I have heard of Genesis Homes. We've sold lots to them for several years. We've actually done certain additions and developments specifically for them, for their products. So I know that they're in the market. I know that they deliver a home at a fair price. And so when I looked at the two scores, I thought, wow, between 1,400 points, they're 30, 40 points difference. Very, very close. So I guess from my perspective, I like working with known quantities, and I know that they know our market and have worked well in our market. So if I were in your shoes, I would pick the one that I'm used to working with. Like I said, but I can't speak about Keystone. I've never heard of them. So anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, I'll close public comment.
So I can just clarify for Keystone, since they didn't come tonight. They are the partner that you selected for the Harrison project. So they're the builders of those 12 units on Harrison that's going to start this summer. I know of at least 2 homes they've built in the city. I don't know if they've done more than that. So they're new to the city. I think you were introduced to them through the Ames Alliance last spring, and they've done other things, but that's our known knowledge of them and the relationship that we have with them.
All right, any closing questions?
Just one. Did both Keystone and Genesis proceed through the RFP process in the way that was expected? Like they answered all the questions, made sure everything was done. You didn't have to make any conjectures.
Genesis did not. They did not exactly follow the intent of the RFP in terms of the pricing, which we've acknowledged. They didn't assign each. They looked at it as a lot, as a combination, as a package rather than as each lot. Keystone addressed each lot with a specific proposal of house and price. So that was the distinction. So we tried to evaluate that. One did exactly what was proposed. One didn't do it exactly the way we thought we would get a package proposed to us.
Thank you.
Kelly, can you fill the rest of council in on what the estimated costs for the homes was going to be?
So I think Keystone offered an indication of their pricing in their original proposal, and then we had to follow up. We thought we should gain that information. It was not a scoring element. I don't have the Genesis. I have the Genesis one in front of me. I don't have Keystone. Genesis was going to range from 365 to 405. I think Keystone was in that same range of sub 400. If you give me a moment, I can probably find it. And then each of them, and then the other thing is each of them proposed multiple floor plans, multiple elevations. On that basis of like house type, we really didn't see a difference. They both were going to approach the house the same way, unfinished basement with stubbed plumbing, so allow for future finishing by the homeowner, or if someone wanted to do that as part of the construction process. Otherwise, they were kind of the same approach to how they would construct them. Timing was slightly different. Keystone wanted to close by October 1st, which was consistent with our RFP. They were waiting to see if they could get tax credits to support the construction of the homes. Genesis is not asking for tax credits, so they wanted to close on 3 in July and then 3 more in October. But in the RFP, as long as it was by October 1st, it was evaluated the same.
Yeah, the Keystone number in their document is homes anticipated to be priced under 375,000, depending on final specifications and market conditions.
All right. Any further questions? Hearing none, entertain motion.
I'll move alternative 1.
Second.
And that is to award it to Keystone. All right, roll call.
Aye.
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 All right. Thank
Just
you.
want to make sure it said this in the alternative bit. When we come back then with those agreements, Keystone requested a letter of support for the workforce housing tax credit. So that would be a separate item on the agenda that night. It doesn't cost us anything because we have the owner occupied tax abatement in place already. So it doesn't have an extra financial ask of the city to do that. But that'll be a companion item then on the 26th.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Vanessa. Move on. Item number 41, South Campus Redirection Area Staff Report.
Benjamin Campbell approaches the staff table. Map of South Campus redirection area is shown.
You want to run it? Oops. I will. It's probably the most visual aids we've had in one night.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The Ames Plan 2040, city's comprehensive plan, outlines several redirection areas, which were parts of the city that are anticipated to redevelop within the next 20 years, which is the life of the plan. Council gave staff previous direction to focus first on this redirection area, which is in the South Campus area. So the kind of main hub of the campus town area is just to the north there. Lincoln Way is just to the north, and then the ISU campus. This area is a mix of multifamily properties and single-family homes. The single-family and two-family homes are to the west and then kind of the east of this area. And the area is zoned mostly residential high density, as you can see. There are 2 overlays as well that impact the area, the West University and then the East University impacted overlay. They do have some similar requirements. Both have an additional parking requirement beyond the base requirement for the rest of the city for multifamily properties. And there are some design requirements. The East overlay also has some additional design requirements and some specific regulations pertaining to fraternities and sororities. The staff did reach out to the owners of these properties and had some discussions with them about what they anticipated for their own properties in the future, what they thought the neighborhood should look like in the future. We heard a wide variety of opinions. We heard that the minimum parking requirement is excessive. There are some in the kind of the center there along Welch, there are some older historic multifamily buildings that we heard one property owner say she'd like to see those preserved. Some property owners saw this as an extension of Campus Town. Others saw it as an area that should be accessible to more than just the students as well. And since the redirection area process began, council has approved some changes to our townhome regulations that could impact development in this area. With the new townhome rules, in exchange for a higher or better design quality, a developer can gain a reduction in parking requirement and some reduced setbacks. Staff did outline several options, and I'll just go through those really quickly. The first option is just a reduction in the overlay parking requirement to match the rest of the city. The second option, which includes option 1, is allowing for some reduction in setbacks and for additional density allowances. And then the third option is further setback reductions, elimination of the 4-story height requirement. RH allows 100 feet or 9 stories, whichever is lower, but within the overlays, it caps that at 4 stories. And then a further reduction in parking beyond what the rest of the city has. And an option 4 could be that some of the changes are targeted geographically to specific blocks or to specific properties. And then option 5 is no change. And we did create you can see here a breakdown of classification of what the properties are. So you've got a mix of single family, 2-family, multifamily, some fraternities, and then several vacant parcels as well. And I can take any questions.
Thank you, Benjamin. Questions?
So I'll throw this couple of softball questions. I'm still a little fuzzy on what our goal is. What are we trying to achieve with this? And then secondly, I went through the report and I'm still a little fuzzy on the rationale for the boundary lines of where you place them for this. Could you address both those for us?
Yeah. So as far as to your first question, many of the properties, in particular the homes that were built as single family, a number of them have been converted. They are older homes and they are reaching the end of their lives. And so we see them as they will be redeveloping in the future, and wanting to get ahead of that and to say, okay, we'd like to have some, have a vision for what it looks like when these properties redevelop and being able to guide that in a chosen direction. As to how these exact boundaries were chosen.
So this came out of the Plan 2040 process. So when we had RDG doing land use scenarios, we tasked them with some infill visioning exercises. And so regardless of what zoning districts exist, RDG looked at this area and just what Benjamin said, there's some opportunity sites here of buildings aging out of their useful life. So they approached it and said, well, we can look at this collection of properties, and they gave us an example to spur the conversation of, is redevelopment in this area desirable, and what type would we want? So the zoning does allow for redevelopment. It's not like it's RL and nothing can change. The question is really, do we think the standards are appropriate for what we really want to see as development? Or are we also trying to facilitate or encourage redevelopment maybe in a quicker fashion by changing regulations? So that's what the redirection area is going to be about here, and basically all of the redirection areas when they come back to you, as they were envisioned in Plan 2040 as conversation starters about redevelopment potential.
And then one final follow-up question. One of the things we always try to think about is if we make a change here, what will be the residual impact on the surrounding neighborhoods? So could you give us a sense that if things develop the way that they're presented here, what might be the impact on the surrounding areas?
Okay. And by impact, you mean the additional units? Or?
So really open-ended question.
I think in the comp plan, when RDG sketched out some footprints of buildings, just various multiplexes and some cottages and other like townhome things. They envision maybe an increase of density of 100 to 150 units. But they were not imagining high rises or anything else of really large substance. They were trying to do more of a moderate, high density type of product, which I would say the current zoning sort of supports now. It's the parking requirement that's quite a bit different. So if you're talking about like that approach, like probably option 1 or option 2, over time, you're probably talking about a net increase of like 150, maybe 200 units if lots of properties redeveloped.
Okay,
And
thanks.
that's because it's really not that large of an area.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
I just give my thoughts if
Sure.
you want that too. So I like the idea of densifying where we can, and if the houses are kind of ending their useful life anyway, I think it's a good area for that. I'm mostly in favor probably of like option 2 or 3, somewhere in that range, like some change to spur development. But this is one where we don't have any like pending projects knocking down the door, and so I'm wondering if we express, our opinion about, what we think a good range of change might be, how much we're willing to tolerate, but then kind of put this one on a back burner because we have other places where there are projects that are pending or would like to be pending, where we can start making a difference now in densification. And, I want to be sensitive to staff time too. So I do want us to look at this area and spur development, but there's nothing like immediately pending or no developers knocking on the door to change this area. So those are just kind of my thoughts.
So one counterpoint to that, and I like how you're being sensitive to staff time. My concern a little bit is if we're going to do something like this, I would want to signal to the world that we're doing this. So we want to avoid people saying, "Oh, I'm surprised. I didn't know this was in the works." So that's my only counterpoint. If we really want to do this, I'd like to create a clear signal on that.
Well, and that's fair. I mean, I would guess maybe, and I agree that we want to make sure we're giving plenty of opportunity for feedback. Now, it sounds like you did meet with a number of property owners, but to Tim's point, that can happen too, right? It's other, maybe people aren't aware till we start down the road of making changes. So, and this would maybe give us some extra time for input from the neighborhood to make sure there aren't any surprises. If we were to propose like a option 2 or 3 type of change, that maybe it gives us time to get extra feedback. But I don't know that we need to put this one on a front burner.
Kelly, if option 2 or 3 were moved tonight, can you comment on what that would look like in terms of your work plan or?
Right. So tonight you're just picking an option. There's no schedule attached to it. So whatever you choose tonight, if you pick something, when I come back with the work plan, I will spend a little bit more time trying to come up with a scope of work and what we would envision that would take to accomplish. And then we would propose a schedule. And then you as the council would pick, start it sooner, start it later, based on seeing all the other things at the same time that you want to start. So if you pick it tonight, it doesn't become a front burner, start June 1st issue. No. It's more likely you're going to look at it and say, I don't know, August, November, whatever fits.
Okay.
And then one question that came up in some of the comments is, at what point is it so far out, it's just part of the Unified Development Code update? And that would probably depend a little bit on how it comes back in that work plan process. Because maybe you're like, man, I really actually want to see something else happen. Just put it in the Unified Development Code as an initiative to be covered with that.
Okay.
Those are things you would sort out with the actual work plan.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
Yep, question from me. So there's an excerpt of the Plan 2040 example in the packet. Would you say that's more of like an option 2 or option 3 approach?
Are we? I'm just trying to bring it up to make sure you're looking at the section from the sub area plan part of the plan.
Yep.
Yeah. I would say that's more likely in the 2.5 range. just because like, again, the height of these buildings was not expected to be over 4 stories. So option 2 keeps you in the 4-story and under range. Option 3 is intended to increase density, where you probably have a podium for parking, probably get to 5-story buildings, things that are much more substantial. These type of buildings have very low parking because they're assuming low parking, or they're not that large.
So I'm interested in option 2 or 3. I could see us going either way. On the further west piece of this section, I could see higher density, like along Hunt Street area. But then the more you get east, closer into some of the single family houses along Knapp, I could see option 2 fitting more there. So I'm not sure if we should go with 3 for greater flexibility, or assign different land chunks to different options. But those are my thoughts.
I would love to hear Gloria's thoughts on this, just because you've been a champion of this neighborhood forever.
What I said in our meeting with staff when I was talking to Kelly earlier is that I think if at this point you put something out that said there could be 9-story apartment buildings on the north side of Knapp, which is how the neighborhood may read option 3, I think there will be anxiety created that's unnecessary at this stage of what we're doing. I was surprised to see that, because I was reading all of this in the context of the RDG Redirection Area report, which focused more, I think, on 4 stories and fitting in as a transition zone between Campus Town with the high rises and the single family homes that are south of Knapp. And so, like Rachel, I agree that section over to the west between Sheldon and Hayward is going to cause less anxiety for the neighborhood, because it fronts on Iowa State property and the Iowa House. And to my knowledge, we've only got 1 owner-occupied residence in there. Am I right about that? The Lestron House?
That one is owner occupied.
Yeah. Are there others?
There are
maybe
1 or 2. Yeah. Well, I can't remember which one. I know the Lestron house is owner
Yeah.
occupied. Yes.
So there aren't very many owner-occupied houses over there. But I would be more in favor of looking at option 2, because I think there are very few people who would disagree that the rental properties north of Knapp that were single-family home conversions are lovely to look at, and I think people would love to see something done to redevelop that area. But I think that opening up the options for these higher residences, which is what happened when Campus Town was redeveloped. I think that plan came out in about 2000, maybe. The whole idea of the high rises in Campus Town was to take the pressure off the surrounding neighborhood. And so people were not all that supportive of those high rises, but they saw it as an opportunity to take that pressure off. If the housing starts moving further south, higher in the sky, I think that there will be people who will move. And we spend an awful lot of time trying to stabilize near campus neighborhoods. So the more you go up with the housing further south, I think the more people who are living in those neighborhoods will start to reconsider what's happening to the neighborhood.
It's a really interesting point, and I hadn't considered how the neighborhood would put a value on redevelopment of properties that maybe were eyesores, and it's better to have higher density and attractive properties than eyesore properties. So that was very helpful. Thank you for that.
All right, we'll open up public comment. Is anyone who wants to address council on this topic tonight? Hector?
Yes, hello. Do I say my name and address again? So Hector Arbor, 519 Oliver Circle. And this is a place that's near and dear to my heart because I grew up in West Ames and I went to Iowa State University. And now as an adult, a young adult in Ames, I go to this area all the time, to Campus Town, this kind of ambit area. So something, looking at the Ames 2040 plan and thinking about the way that students interact with Iowa State University, one of the big issues, questions that students often face is where are they going to live? And right now, pretty much most of the properties in the western part, like just west of campus, have been developed. These areas just south, there are some that have not been redeveloped, but when I looked at individual properties that were zoned RH to see whether they could be developed, I realized that the existing parking minimums especially were a huge, it made it basically impossible, even when I was like drawing it out, to redevelop them. So a lot of students end up moving quite far away from campus, and they have to commute either by driving to the parking lot or by taking Cyride. And I think it would be a really excellent thing for the students of Iowa State if they were able to affordably live near campus. And I also do think that it would take pressure off of, as Councilmember Betcher said, I do think it would take pressure off of neighborhoods that are semi-surrounding campus. I would also look, when considering the impacts on the surrounding neighborhoods, to consider how much of the surrounding neighborhoods are already rentals, because there are parts in very near where I live where it's already like pretty much all student rental houses, and the effects on them, I don't think they will care so much as other neighborhoods that are more full of homeowners. I think that it would be great to at least study option 3 because that would allow, it might be, I wonder if you could make some note. I do think that the parking minimums, setbacks, etc., are going to be more important for redevelopment than the height itself. So perhaps you could do some kind of option in between 2 and 3 that would make people less scared. Thank you.
Thank you, Hector. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public comment.
One other thought I had is that if we do look more at option 3, it does give us room to fall back, right, to option 2. Whereas if we start with option 2, we kind of we don't give ourselves maybe the full potential we might if we looked at option 3. I don't want to startle people either, and so that's why I'm recommending that maybe we look at option 3, right? But then again, that gives us room to fall back if people come and they're like, "What?" And so
I'll remind you of the union, the construction of the union, and the furor that raised. And I know that if you look at Welch Avenue, you've got those 2 apartments, the Haverkamp apartments and the Stritz, which fit in beautifully. Nobody raised an eyebrow about the construction of those apartments because of what they replaced and that they blend in with the neighborhood. And so I really do worry when people were presented with this redirection area stuff in the 2040 plan. What I heard was, oh, it wouldn't be so bad if we had 4-story apartments. I don't remember anybody suggesting we might go above that. And that to me is almost like a bait and switch. Yeah, sure, we'll go along with the redirection area, but now we're suggesting we might redirect to 9 stories. I just don't like that idea, knowing what I know about the neighborhood.
are there maybe areas where it would be acceptable? And
well, if you had to look at one of the areas, it would be that area off on the west side between Sheldon and Hayward, again, because of the dynamics.
Because option 3 does mention maintaining reduced height along places that border, substantial single family, right? So I think it could be a blend the thing I like about option 3 specifically here that's listed in the staff report is that reduction or elimination of minimum parking rates beyond what's required elsewhere in Ames for RH zoning. So, I mean, if that were an element of option 2, that would help. Or I don't know, Kelly, how can we blend those options at all?
Nope,
No?
they're just black and white. No blending.
You're pulling my leg.
Of course. I think obviously they're guides. If
Okay.
there's something that you like out of 3 that you want to push into option 2, or then go ahead and do that. Option 3 builds on 1 and 2. So you wouldn't pull something forward to 3, you would move something from 3 back to 2.
Right. Sure.
So it's your point, you could propose option 4 from in this area west of Hayward and then east of Hayward, looking at option 3, that would give staff some general idea what, in other words, that would keep it a lower density east of Hayward, but then saying if there's interest going at a higher level, which I think I heard Gloria indicate that there might be more potential support for west of Hayward. I don't want to speak for you, but I think is that what I'm hearing?
I think there will be less anxiety created among residents of the neighborhood if you're looking at that area.
Only that area.
Yeah, I mean, well, I
For height.
for the height, yes.
Right.
So, you want me to take a stab at this?
Please do.
Okay. I would move that we consider option 2, but with the element, also looking at though.
Option 2?
Could I take a
it's
stab
gonna
at it?
You want me to do it the other way around?
Yeah.
Okay, so all right, I scratch that. I would move that we look at option 3, with the exception of the height east of Hayward, keeping that in the option 2 realm.
Is that good, Kelly? Or
Is there a second? Sure.
I'll second.
All right, discussion.
I'll consider other tweaks as requested by.
Okay.
Seems very realistic.
All right, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. All right.
All right. Thank you.
All right, move on R42.
Justin Clausen, Public Works Director, approaches the staff table.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
Pavement improvements map is shown.
There we go. I got it now. Tonight we have a staff report in front of you regarding sidewalk infill along Delaware Avenue. This is a capital improvement project that has moved forward through the CIP process. In developing that project, and keeping with the complete streets plan, we look to have sidewalk connectivity throughout a corridor on at least one side of a project. And when we were developing plans for this project, we come across the west side of Delaware Avenue that is probably 90% complete with sidewalk. And there are 4 properties that are missing sidewalk infill to complete connectivity through the corridor there. So in developing these plans, we met with the neighborhood, met with these 4 properties that did not have sidewalk in front of their properties. 3 of the 4 were did not want the sidewalk infilled in front of theirs. They express concerns around maintenance during winter and also liability concerns for trips and falls and whatnot for residents using the sidewalk adjacent to their street. So as such, we are seeking direction from council tonight. We presented 4 options for you to consider. Option 1 is basically do nothing. Council can waive the requirements of complete streets plan, say do not install any sidewalk infill. And I think it's important for me to say as well, all this sidewalk will be within the public right of way. We're not acquiring any property with this. And none of this will be assessed directly to the property. It will all be paid through project funds. So option 1 is to do nothing. Option 2 is on the screen here, and I'll admit it's a little difficult to see. The properties are here in kind of the southwest part of the project. 4 properties adjacent to one another, 2 crossing Dover Drive, is the option that we presented to the neighborhood when we had the public meeting. So this is option 2 that we presented to the neighborhood. Option 3, I will present next to you, involves utilizing city property on the east side, and it's kind of north in this direction as well, north and east side of Delaware, up till you get to Dover Drive, and then it crosses back over and then goes across 2 non-consenting properties again and connects back into the west side there. So that would be option 3. I should note that option 2 and option 3 are roughly the same cost. Option 2 is $19,000. Option 3 is estimated at $21,000. Finally, option 4 is one that hasn't been fully vetted yet. This involves sidewalk infill on the east side of Delaware Avenue. So this would bypass the 3 non-consenting properties, but we have not spoken to the other properties along here. There are 10 properties that are missing sidewalk in this stretch of the proposal. 2 of those do belong to the City of Ames, but we have not sought input there. So we're looking for some direction from council. I know at least one property owner is here tonight to speak, and happy to answer any other questions you have on this.
Thanks, Justin. Questions for staff?
Justin, this is not our first rodeo in this kind of situation. Could you remind council just sort of what our historical approach has been in these situations, just so we don't have to act consistently all the time, but it's just helpful to have a sense of how we've acted in the past.
Yes, very much so. I can't remember the years. I apologize. It's probably been around 2019, 2020. We did install some sidewalk. Let me take a step back. The Complete Streets Plan was put together, I think, 2018. And that's where we presented some options to council for them to decide how they'd like to implement it. And one of the things council directed Public Works to do was to ensure we have connectivity on one side of the street. So moving forward with that, we looked to that point to develop any project ensuring the connectivity was there. We had, I think, the first project where we really did this in 2019, 2020, and we just decided to do it without a lot of communication back and forth with the property owners, and that resulted in some challenges. There's obviously challenges in the winter that were presented. There were some challenges with the right-of-way. There were challenges with existing trees. And since that point, we've taken the stance of we will seek voluntary, approval to install it adjacent to the property. Council's still within their authority to install within the right-of-way, but we try to get the property owners on board to do that. And when we don't have that approval from the property owner, we're bringing it back to council to help us make this decision. So everyone's involved in it. Want to make sure it's right for the community, and council's also supporting that decision.
And are there, in fact, any trees or other physical barriers to putting the sidewalk in on the west side on those 4 properties?
Yeah, there will be, and the property owner is here tonight to talk about that. There is at least one tree that we would probably have to do some pruning on. It's more of an ornamental tree, and the branch comes out kind of low, so we would have to do some pruning on that. And their property does slope away pretty significantly from the street. We feel there's still room to get the sidewalk improvement in there, but we would have to touch those trees and do some modification to them, some pruning on that to make it happen.
Great, thank you.
Where would you have to locate the sidewalk along that west side? Would it be right behind the curb, or would you have some green space between?
We'd have minimum green space. We'd probably have 2 feet of green space, and that's one of the challenges that we have. As you're aware, my background in operations, when we don't have room to store snow, the plows will put it there. And unfortunately, the timing doesn't work out a lot of times, where someone may have cleared the sidewalk and then we push it right back on there. And that's not what we want to see. But when we put it at the back of curb, it's challenging. We have about 7 feet of useful space that we believe we can get the sidewalk in there. So that would leave us with 2 foot of a zone that we would either pave if it's doesn't want to be maintained by the adjacent property owner, or we could leave it green space if they so desired. But that would leave us 2 feet of clearance, which is probably about the minimum, and then 5 foot of sidewalk outside of that.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Justin, on the map, it's difficult for me to tell. I'm assuming that the sidewalk goes on the west side all the way from Ontario down to just above Dover. Is that right?
Correct.
And so the completion would be that dog leg down at the bottom.
Correct. There's 4 properties. It's installed all the way from Ontario down to, as you mentioned, 2 properties north of Dover. So I'm trying to zoom in here a little bit to try to make it a little more visible. This is option 2. I can't find my mouse here. It's just 2 properties north of Dover, 2 properties south of Dover, and then there is sidewalk at Chelsea Court on the, what I call the east side of Chelsea Court there.
And those houses at the bottom of the dog leg between Dover and North Dakota, that looks like there are 2 properties down between Dover and North Dakota. Is that,
Yeah.
that
Correct.
right?
That is correct, yes.
Both of those front on something other than Delaware, right?
Yes.
And when we look at, I think it's is it option 2 that crosses over at Dover? Or is it
That'd be option 3.
option 3? Okay, so I'm assuming the reason we've got the crossing at that location is because Dover's there.
Correct. So what we try to do is we want to limit mid-block crossings. They're not a place that most drivers expect people to cross, and so we're trying to think about pedestrian safety as we do that as well. And so by crossing it at Dover, what we do there is we allow it to be at least at an intersection where there's a stop control from Dover, but there's not stop control on Delaware. So it's kind of a hybrid that I would say maybe isn't the cleanest solution, but it is an option that we could look at.
And the east side, which we haven't explored with the property owners yet,
Correct.
has the 2 frontages of city property, and there are currently 2 strips of sidewalk on the east side, one with the townhome development down by the substation, and one with that group of multifamily just to the north of the community gardens. Is that
Correct.
right?
If you can see on the map here, there's a section of an existing sidewalk right here to the south, the townhomes I think believe you're talking about. Then there's a multifamily complex up here that has sidewalk in front of it as well. The rest of it would have to be infilled.
I'm just looking at this thinking, we've got 2 city properties on one side of the street, and it feels like we should be trying to complete sidewalk at least in the segment where there's the community garden, because it would attach to 2 existing pieces of sidewalk on the east side, making future improvements less arduous if we were to expand, and connecting 2 orphaned sidewalk stretches. But that doesn't get us down to North Dakota, and so it would have to be in conjunction with what was happening at the dogleg on the west side.
I mean, and the west side is all sidewalk all the way up except that. I mean, on the east side, while there are 2 pre-existing bits of sidewalk, they're not connected yet. It's a lot more properties that we're going to have to disrupt. And I guarantee you those property owners are not going to be any more in favor of having sidewalk put. I mean, the city property, that's a different story.
But there's only one property owner, isn't there, between the
2.
Are there 2?
There's a residential north and south of the new townhome development.
Yeah, there's several
there's
properties.
one south of it too.
Yes. Yeah. There's one south. There's at least one to the north, and then there might be another one in there that I can't zoom in very well on this map. But there were 10 properties we had to cross, and 2 of them belong to the city, so there'll be 8 additional properties if we did the entire east side. I know you're not talking about that, but that was the.
Yeah, I'm not interested in doing the entire east side.
Yeah.
But I am interested in a segment of the east side.
That's what I was going to echo too, is that I'm most interested in option 2, completing the full west side. But I think it would make sense to have the middle section from the community gardens to the townhomes on the east side completed. And if it makes sense to do with this project, possibly we could do it. I know there's also substation improvements that possibly it could take time or take place at that time as well, when the driveway gets paved from gravel to pavement for that. So the timing doesn't matter to me, but I do think there should be sidewalk connecting the townhomes to the community gardens on that piece of land.
All right, we'll go ahead and open up public comment. We have Pete Matthews. You want to address council tonight?
Good evening. I'm Pete Matthews. I'm here with my wife Jen there in the back. We live at 4606 Dover Drive, so we're one of the affected properties. In early March, we were on vacation, unable to attend the public meeting. So regarding the proposed sidewalk project, and since returning in mid-March, we have visited with Mr. Clausen and Mr. Ibrahim to discuss various details regarding the project. First of all, we definitely appreciate the lack of sidewalk and it being a significant safety concern. We've been at this house for 4 years now, and we see many walkers and joggers on the west side of the road next to our property walking through the grass, which has never been a problem for us, but also in the road, which is not great. We recognize this is not ideal, and we've long thought that sidewalk was needed for safety in the area. However, it always seemed to us the best choice would be to put the sidewalk along the east side on city property across the street every time we looked at it. There would be an added benefit there of access to the city-owned green space. People use that space often in warmer months, flying kites, walking their dogs, and enjoying the grass. And the city already includes this space in their regular maintenance schedule, mowing in the summer months and clearing snow along North Dakota in the winter. Secondly, putting a sidewalk on the west side of Delaware has the potential to impact our property in multiple ways. In addition to some bushes, we have 2 very mature trees that are near that location that provide shade and privacy and noise reduction along a busy road. Keeping the affected trees trimmed in accordance with the ordinances will significantly reduce these benefits. And even worse, the trees could be completely lost if the roots were damaged down the road, potentially. So also 175 foot, which is how long our property is along that side. The east side would dramatically increase the amount of time and money we'd spend clearing snow on our property. And more importantly, the sidewalk would also be on a slope, which is increasing our risk to injury trying to keep it cleared. We do understand the higher cost and burden to build a sidewalk on the east side of the road all the way to Ontario, which is option 4, which you were just speaking about. It does have some city property on it. It is a lot more property owners that would be affected. But, you know, as an Ames citizen, I want more access, more walking space. So it would be great if we could have that, but understanding that it does cost 4 times the amount. Where was I? I got lost here. Oh, so with the help from Public Works and Justin, we proposed an idea, which was option 3, a lot with their help, that would build a portion of the sidewalk on the east side of Delaware instead of the west, improving access to the city-owned park area and overall walkability in the neighborhood. A crosswalk would be installed north of Dover Drive to continue access all the way to Ontario. Lastly, I'd just like to finish by saying that in a hypothetical situation, where the city-owned land across the street from us was actually just filled with residential homes, Jen and I would feel very differently. Community safety is important to us. We would be ready to take on the burden of the sidewalk. However, now when we look at our side of the street, filled with mature trees, electrical poles, and a very narrow strip of grass, and a narrow strip of grass, and then look across the street to the public space with nothing but green grass, we feel the our alternative solution makes more sense. And thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anybody else want to address council on this? All right, we'll close public input.
Justin, do we have any information on safety of that corner at Dover? If we were to be looking at crossing there, I don't know. My impression is that people just kind of turn in and whip up the.
Yes.
I would say I don't know that there's anything that sticks out in my mind that we have that we're addressing with this project or any concerns. The challenge can be sometimes near misses are not reported, so you don't always know about that. We would be introducing a condition where people are crossing, but I think it's just something to be aware of if we're weighing one over the other, that crossing of Delaware at that location is less ideal than crossing Dover in that location.
Yeah, I just can't. I completely understand that where the homeowners are coming from. I mean, the additional work and that equals time and money that it takes to clear sidewalk. But the mid-block crossing is really unsafe for pedestrians, and we shouldn't do those anymore knowingly. Like, we should try to reduce the ones we've got, and we shouldn't build them knowingly anymore. Especially, when, several of the topics tonight that we've talked about have had to do with pedestrian safety. So I myself would be in favor of option 2.
All right. Is there any further comments?
I have one question, Justin. So does the level of traffic serve as a factor for our decision? So the running community is not using Delaware. They're using North Dakota. That's great. Multi-use trail there, just a block to the east. Do you think that's a factor in our decision-making? So I have a big concern with Ross Road, where there's tons of traffic and there's no sidewalk on north or south. Here, this is a fairly small strip, but I'm guessing there's not a ton of pedestrian traffic. You think this should be a factor for us? Should we just out of philosophical?
Are you asking, is there a ton of pedestrian traffic or just vehicles?
Pedestrian?
I believe what you would see is, because there's not connectivity to South Dakota, or excuse me, to North Dakota right now, that a lot of people likely go north through the neighborhood to get to Ontario and then over to Dakota. When I was meeting with the property owners I just presented here, there was an individual that's literally walking the path that we had just talked. He was on the grass and then the curb, walking up on the west side. Not sure where he was going. I didn't speak to him, but I believe there's more than we realize. And I think sometimes lack of a better term, you build it, they will come. If there's connectivity, it'll be used. So I think it's probably less traversed than North Dakota, as you mentioned, that serves as kind of an arterial, not only for pedestrian traffic, but also vehicular traffic. But I believe this serves kind of as a sort of a collector into this neighborhood, and that would probably be well used if it were in place.
Yep, thanks.
So following along with this discussion about the crossing over, I recognize what Bronwyn's saying about the danger of adding those crossings, because we've been talking about that. I'm wondering if we were to complete the sidewalk on the east side from North Dakota to connect through the community gardens plot, whether a crossing at Utah would be safer because people aren't coming around the corner at that point, and whether we accomplish the same thing as doing the little stretch down at the bottom, but we also get both of the city properties.
I would likely say that the crossing at Utah would be better served there because of where it sits on top of the hill and better visibility coming from both locations. I'd say it is better than Dover in that stance there.
It's better than a mid-block, but
Correct.
it's not
Better
better
than
than the west side of Delaware.
I think the other factor to that too is that we didn't estimate the cost of that kind of going halfway through there. I would say you're probably in the $40,000 range, just off the cuff. It's about half of what option 4 would be. So just a thing to consider as well.
Okay, is there any further questions or comments? Otherwise, I entertain a motion.
I'll move option 2.
I'll second.
So one comment, Mr. Matthews, thank you for coming tonight. Your comments were very cogent, and you stayed long meeting tonight to make them. So thanks for coming and appreciate your input.
All right, those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. Is there any other further motions?
What did you say, John?
Are there any further motions? No.
I was going to move that we continue looking at putting in sidewalk on the east side on the city properties and whatever comes in between them as other projects might enable us to finish some of that so that we at least have a little more connectivity to our own properties.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Move on to item number 43, hearing on Xenia Rural Water District for sale of potable water.
John Dunn, Water and Pollution Control Director, approaches the staff table.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. What we have before you tonight is an amendment to an agreement between the city and Xenia Rural Water District that was originally executed in 1996. That agreement allows for the sale of drinking water from the city to Xenia for their subsequent sale and delivery to their own customers. So the new amended agreement is going to provide for the following items. It's going to provide for an increase in the maximum day water sale from 250,000 gallons per day to 500,000 gallons per day. Xenia will make a one-time payment of $1,464,500 as a reimbursement for the incremental capacity that they use. That's similar to the one-time capacity that they made back in 1996 for the initial 250,000 gallons. Xenia will pay for the water at our adopted ordinance rate as a non-peaking industrial customer. They'll get that rate for the first 5 years of the agreement as they're building out their infrastructure to be able to accept that volume of water. After that, they'll have to qualify for that rate just as all the rest of our industrial customers do. That rate will adjust as you adjust water rates in the future, so Xenia's rates will automatically go up in step with our own customers. And there's a minimum take provision in the agreement. Currently, Xenia has been purchasing very little water from us, and so that 250,000 gallons that we've reserved for them, we've not been generating any revenue off of. So the new agreement has a clause that says after the 5-year period when they've had the opportunity to build their infrastructure, they're going to need to pay for at least 200,000 gallons a day, whether they take that volume of water or not. A key part of the agreement was Xenia's willingness to lower the water service territory transfer cost that the developers of Hayden's Preserve and Auburn Trail would have to pay. That's I think going to be a significant boost to improving the financial viability of those two developments. There is one minor wording change in the contract from what was in your packet that we would like to have you approve tonight. And it's in that very last paragraph, number 15, that I have up on the screen there. The initial term of the agreement was 40 years. And the intent was that at the end of the 40 years, either party could cancel the agreement with 48 months notice. We didn't say that explicitly. So this change, that clause highlighted in yellow, just makes it clear that that 48-month advance notice would be available as an option after the full term is expired. Finally, the one element of the agreement that—
Excuse me, John.
Sure.
I'll make sure. Is what you have up there what is recommended to be modified in the agreement that was not in the packet? Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, the yellow highlighted portion is not in the contract that was in your packet.
And that is what staff is recommending.
This is what we are recommending. is
So
this new
any
language.
motion will need to include that in addition to what is in the packet. Is that correct?
That is exactly correct. Thank you. The one element of the agreement that triggers the need for the hearing that you're going to hold tonight is the provision that allows them to construct a pump station on our property. The city attorney says that that is essentially a long-term lease, and Iowa law requires a public hearing for disposing of of an interest in property. So that's the purpose of the hearing, is specifically the portion that allows them to construct on our parcel. So that's what I have for you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Hearing none, declare the public hearing on this item to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this topic? Seeing and hearing none, declare the public hearing to be closed.
John, this is a little difficult for me, and I'm going to be deferential to the staff and their negotiations, but Xenia has been very difficult for our city to work with for the last 10 years. So I'm going to go along with this only because of its recommendation, but time and time again, Xenia has utilized its seemingly unchecked power and been almost impossible to negotiate with. So I'm coming to this because of the staff, not because I have any love of Xenia, because of the way they've treated our citizens.
To that point, do you sense that there's a change in their orientation?
I do know that they have a new general manager, CEO, in the last 2 years. I happen to know Royce. I worked alongside him 30 years ago at the city of Des Moines. Through this whole negotiation, it's been very constructive, positive tone. I think there's some provisions in here that are going to be very valuable for our customers, generating extra revenue on capacity that we've already installed will be helpful. Xenia's intent also is, once they have the capacity in place, to take the full 500,000 gallons a day, every day. And that's a uniform demand load for us 365 days a year. That's a very attractive customer. It's hard to find that type of a customer. So it'll let us maximize the investment that we've already made.
Well, maybe this will be an opportunity for us to reset the relationship, but it's been rough up to this point.
So Brian, can you just comment to Tim's point? It has been challenging. There's been extremely expensive buyout provisions. Does this remedy that for all Xenia water territory buyouts for other developers, or is there some that are reserved that would be?
This addresses two pending developments. You'll recall back, what was it now, John? 4 years ago, 5 years ago, we entered into an agreement with Xenia that established the provisions for Xenia to serve customers as we grew into Xenia territory. So City of Ames residents that would be served by Xenia for water. And we had a series of areas that were outlined where Xenia was willing to grant us territory, areas where Xenia was willing to entertain a buyout if it occurred within a certain period of time, and then areas where Xenia was not willing to entertain a buyout and would retain those customers if the city continued to grow into those areas. So, we, from our standpoint, that agreement is in effect in perpetuity. So from our standpoint, those areas are largely settled, and that was one of the goals of that agreement. There were some questions in the records about whose territory was what. So we resolved those issues. This proposed agreement is really limited in terms of territory to these two developments and the buyout that's required there.
So just to summarize, and I apologize for repeating, but right now we're going forward. We are completely settled. There's a set agreeable amount for a buyout, where buyout is to be desired at a reasonable rate, like $3,000 an acre or something like that. Any other place that we've agreed to let them serve the territories, for example, up in Northwest, that's taken care of. We're not going to have in a year, Xenia says, no, you can't buy, the price is, higher, because this is the great opportunity to kind of level set, get everything taken care of, and then we're not having this conversation anymore. I know staff has spent months and months and months working on this.
Right. That previous agreement addresses the buyout terms for the territory that Xenia is willing to relinquish. Yes.
Okay.
I have one other question, and that relates to this additional language. Was this approved by Xenia at the April 23rd meeting, or did they approve the document that's in our packet?
So they initially approved the version that's in the packet, but they raised this as a concern to their staff who brought it to me. And we agreed that we would make this change. Their board is scheduled to meet tomorrow afternoon to approve this revised language as well.
All right, is there a motion on one of the alternatives, and to whatever motion? If it's alternate number one, would you also add the proposed additional language to paragraph 15? Is that what you'd call it?
Yes.
Move alternative one pursuant to the mayor's comments.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Move on, item number 44. Any questions for John regarding the first reading of the ordinance regarding the increases in water and sewer rates? Is there anyone who will open a public comment? Is anyone wants to address council on the first reading of the ordinance increasing water rates by 3.5% and sanitary sewer rates by 5.5%? Seeing that there's no public input, close public comment, entertain motion on first reading of the ordinance.
Move on first.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Okay, move on. Item number 45, rezoning with master plan for 4605 and 4510 Hyde and adjacent properties to the north, Auburn Trail Development. Entertain motion on resolution approving the rezoning agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 And entertain motion on third reading and adoption of ordinance number 4593, rezoning and master plan.
Move on third.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 And on item 46, entertain motion on third reading and adoption of ordinance number 4594, zoning text amendment creating a new zoning overlay district, West University pedestrian enhancement district related to density, parking, and design requirements to be applied between Sheldon and Highland and Lincoln Way and Oakland.
Move on third.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Move on to disposition of communications to council. We have 7 items tonight. First is email regarding Gray Avenue Sunset Drive intersection from Claire Hosh. Is there any interest in referring this to staff?
I would move we refer this to staff for a memo.
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is a request from Jackie Frick for a food pantry option in Ames on city property.
So I appreciate the sentiment of this. I almost wonder if this is a better fit with the Romero House. I mean, we've got some existing collaboration in providing for homeless, and plus we've got the Food at First. I'm trying to understand how this fits in. I don't have a huge love for this given the existing services we have.
Well, I guess we can't debate it too much. I was going to say one thing I thought was interesting was that they wanted to put it at a church, but that wasn't allowed given the zoning where the church was. And so I would move that we communicate to the petitioner, I guess, that we love the idea, but we would prefer that they work to find a place on private property where they could install their unit. And I guess if they have specific ways in which they want us to help them achieve that,
Okay.
they could ask us. But no, oh, sorry. I'm going to scratch that. I'm just going to say we move to reach out and let them know that we like the idea and we'd prefer they put it on private property.
Second.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Next is pedestrian crossing evaluation, Lincoln Way and South Russell that Brooke Ellison mentioned, referred to in our public forum. Is there any interest in putting this on an agenda or do nothing with it?
Are we allowed to request any additional information if we put it on an agenda? Okay. I'd move that we put this on a future agenda and evaluate the side stops in the area that might contribute to additional pedestrian crossings of Lincoln Way.
Second.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Next is an email from Rhonda Frericks regarding workforce housing proposal development, asking for some questions. Can we just ask staff to reply to her questions? As you may recall, she posed a number of questions at our meeting 2 weeks ago. I had suggested she reach out and send us those questions. And so I think as a courtesy, just asking staff to reply.
I would move that we ask staff to please reply to those questions.
Thank you.
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is from Paul and Cindy Larson, Iron Way annexation. It was part of the conversation we had this evening. Unless there's anything that you want to communicate further with her or them. Okay. We have a memo from Kelly on the 608 Burnett Jensen request.
I would move we put this on a future agenda.
Okay.
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. And last is response to Ames silversmithing request for site plan changes. Kelly, I believe you suggested maybe just putting on a future agenda, but it may end up being resolved prior to going on an agenda. Is that correct?
I would move we put this on a future agenda if necessary.
Thank you.
Second.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. All right. Reports of governing body. Anything from Discover Ames tonight?
You got things to say, Tim?
It was a fairly routine meeting, updates on events that have taken place and very positive impacts for hotels and restaurants.
And they're looking at ways to shift their partnership member dues in order to try and facilitate businesses being allowed to pay at a time that they can better focus on payments. So moving it to a fiscal year cycle instead of a calendar year cycle, which is actually a relatively big thing. And yeah, we've got a bunch of activities coming up. You can watch for another concert in the summer. Post Malone and Jelly Roll will be here in July.
Okay, very good. Anything from Ames Regional Economic Alliance tonight?
We have a meeting on Thursday.
Yep, meeting this week.
Meeting this week?
Mhm.
Story County Emergency Management, no meeting scheduled. Transit?
We reviewed our HERDA contract and the annual customer survey and approved the public transportation infrastructure grant applications for 2027.
Good, all right. All right, council comments. I want to introduce somebody in the audience. Trey, why don't you come up here and introduce yourself? This is our new to-be appointed, hopefully, if we all agree, in 2 weeks, to our new ex officio. So, Trey, if you want to introduce yourself, tell us about yourself a little bit. You have 3 minutes, or no, just kidding.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Trainerson. I'm a freshman in political science and international studies. Just this last Wednesday, I was appointed by the student government of Iowa State to be the next ex officio. Super excited. Been talking to Emily a lot. She's an amazing person, as you all probably know, and looking forward to the transition. And I should be on the starting on the agenda the next meeting.
Wow, we didn't run away yet, so you're. That's a good sign.
So why did you want to, seriously, why did you want to be an ex officio on council?
Just in political science, it's kind of my interest there, but then also like a leadership position. I'm off campus, so working with the community and stuff like that is where I see myself in the future as well. So yeah, just having experience and then also impacting the students.
Welcome.
And where are you from?
I'm from Mobile, which it's near Sioux City, smaller town, Northwest Iowa.
Yeah.
I asked Trey before, he's like, give me around Ames, during the summer. He said, no, but I'm going to come down for all the council meetings. Well, let's talk about that. That's a long drive both ways. But the point is, I heard from the new president, vice president, and they said, we got a guy that's really, really excited about taking this position. So we're looking forward to having you.
That's cool.
As long as council approves, I don't know, it's going to be easy.
We're a tough group.
So I mentioned to him that be on consent in 2 weeks, and once it's approved, we'll seat him. Welcome at the dais. So,
Awesome.
Thanks, Trey.
Yes, thank you guys.
Welcome forward. All right, Tim. Anything tonight?
Stash the Trash was I think a pretty good event. Lots of areas of Ames were clean, so thanks for everyone who worked on that. We spent considerable time tonight talking about a very small stretch of Delaware, but not far away is a very big stretch called Ross Road. And I'm going to periodically remind council, this is a glaring example of a neighborhood that is desperate to have attention on sidewalks. So I'm not prepared to make any motion, but I just want to keep that neighborhood in front of us. That's all I have tonight.
Thanks, Brian.
We have a couple events coming up. I just wanted to mention, since we don't have a council meeting before they hit, and that is the mayor and city council bike ride on May 9th. That's Saturday. Always a fun event and has been nice weather. I shouldn't have said that out loud. Last few years, it's been gorgeous, so I hope it is again, and hope people can join us for that. And then on the 11th is the kickoff for Bike to Work Week. So there's a whole week full of events and breakfasts and things like that. But the kickoff is the breakfast here at City Hall. So the 9th for the bike ride, and then the 11th for the bike breakfast.
What time is that bike breakfast?
Oh, sorry. The bike breakfast is 7 a.m. until 9 a.m. here at City Hall.
One other agenda item. On Saturday the 9th, thanks for bringing this up, we have the Ontario Park open house.
Thank you.
And that's from 1 to 3. So it's an opportunity for people to have a chance to see this amazing 50-acre park that's a public park that we have yet to determine what we're going to do with it. But a first opportunity for the public to see it. Yeah, thanks for reminding.
Anything else, Ramon?
That's all. Thank you.
Nita?
Nothing tonight, thanks.
Amber?
Nothing for me.
Nothing tonight.
Gloria?
This morning, a contingent from the city of Newton came to check out Ines Grove Inclusive Playground and the Miracle Park. The mayor and 2 council members and 3 Parks and Recreation staffers were there, and they were very excited by what they saw and took a lot of ideas back. So it was a great opportunity for Keith and Joshua to show off the park and its facilities. Also, I think we probably all got a request from Susan for volunteers for Juneteenth, and it seemed like a good opportunity to mention that the Juneteenth celebration, Story County and Ames Juneteenth celebration, will be on Saturday, June 13th in Bandshell Park from 12:30 to 5. And if you are on council and you have not volunteered to help out with that, I know we can use more volunteers.
Very good. All right. Thank you, everybody. Entertain motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Show Ames City Council meeting credits.